God. What do we got to do here this evening? Right on, and I forgot it. Well, I didn't forget. I just had not got a chance to do it. So, 2 weeks ago, the last time we met with our little group, we talked about, well, y'all shared your verses and why you chose them, and it was awesome. I mean, it really was. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I would like for each of you to keep that verse handy, knowledgeable, and I would actually like for y'all, if you would, to give me what your verse was. I'd like to have a hard copy of your verse. So I'm asking each one of you to please write your verse down on a little piece of paper or something, or text it to me, or email it to me, or whatever. Yes, ma'am. Well, you certainly can. Go right ahead, Miss Cameron. Cameron's verse for the youth group. Is that from Isaiah? Or was that from John? Matthew, yes.
Matthew what?
Matthew 3:2. That can also be found something like that. Oh, Matthew what? 3:3. Yeah. See, for this is he that was spoken of by the prophet. It's Isaiah. It's in Isaiah that's talking about that. That's why I asked you from Isaiah. But that's a very good one. The voice of the one crying in the wilderness, prepare ye the way of the Lord, make his paths straight. Very good. Why did you pick that? So why did you like it? Just like it. That's all right too. Sometimes the Lord lays something on our heart. It's not for us, but for others. Remember that too. So thank you very much, Miss Cambridge. That was very good. Now, does anybody remember what the verse I brought was?
That was like Psalms
119, 105. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I'd like for y'all to remember that one. It's a good one because it's true. And it'll be something that you can remember as you move on up in through life and stuff like that. When you get in those situations that are, you're wondering what should I do here, remember Psalm 119, 105. And then you'll remember to turn to the Lord and the Word of God to help make those decisions. All right. So, Romans chapter 1. Who's got anything they'd like to share from their studies of Romans chapter 1? And it can be on the whole chapter. It can be on a section. It can be on a verse. It can be whatever. Anybody got anything? Anybody? Anybody at all? Did anybody read Romans chapter 1? No. All right.
Starting on verse 26, it sounds a lot like today's.
Very good point. Yes, ma'am, back there. Hold on a second. Mr. What?
Romans 1.
Huh?
Romans 1.
Germans?
Romans 1.
Oh, Romans 1. Yes. I was going to say, what Germans? What about Romans 1?
That's what we're looking here.
The chapter 1.
Oh, okay.
I guess you're just letting you know.
Thank you very much. Just you have more to add? Or? Okay. Actually, that's a very good point. And honestly, when I selected Romans 1 for y'all to look at some, I was looking more into that latter part of Romans 1, which is, honest to goodness, a very good picture of the world. Period. It's what it describes things. And if you'll look, this is just verses 21 through the end, 32. And I've got stuff jotted down all over the place concerning this because there is so much that applies in Romans chapter 1 to things we see today that explains things. If you will read and study Romans chapter 1, especially picking up from just pick up from verse 16 and go through the end at 32. You will find a lot of answers to things in this world. And I'll just give you a couple of things, because it's not what I've got for this evening. It's from Romans 1, but not from here. Did you know that the Mother Earth movement, global warming, environmentalism, extreme environmentalism and things like that comes from verse 25 of Romans chapter 1. It tells us about it right there. Verse 25, who changed the truth of God into a lie and worshiped and served the creature more than the Creator, who is blessed forever. Amen. That's the worship of the world, the worship of things of the world. That's those these people that do the like global warming ideas and things like that. Believe it or not, that's what he's talking about. It's right there.
And we referenced in Sunday school, verse 28, even though we didn't like look it up, or this is what we were talking about, where it says, God delivered them over to a corrupt mind.
Yeah, a reprobate mind, and to do those things which are not convenient. Or you know what that means? You know what that's saying right there? Verse 28. Yeah. And even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate, or as Sister Jessica said, a corrupt mind, to do those things which are not convenient. That's talking about the searing of the conscience. That's talking about you do bad things, and you do bad things, you do bad things, and at first when you do some of those bad things, when you steal that piece of bubble gum the first time, you feel bad about it. You know you shouldn't be doing it. You feel it inside of you. But you actually go ahead and do it, and then you keep doing it, and then the next thing you know, eventually one day you kill somebody and it don't even bother you. Why? Because your conscience has been seared. God has given you over to that reprobate mind. Or in other words, He has seared your conscience so you don't hear that coming from God. Do you know what your conscience is? Anybody know what a conscience actually is? No, it's not your mind. All right. But that is a result of your conscience, but what is your conscience? Anybody? It's the Holy Spirit talking inside of you. That's what a conscience is. The word conscience has been made and given. And let me tell you all something. We're not, like I said, I want to get to what I got, but it's not long. Psychology. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that psychology is all bad and all wrong or nothing like that. But let me tell you what psychology was developed for. It was developed to be an alternative to the Word of God. That is where psychology comes from. The practice of psychology, the science of psychology, whatever you want to call it, it comes from this. Now, you hear a lot about Christian psychology and things like that. I want to tell you this. If you need to use a Christian psychologist or something like that, investigate why they call themselves a Christian psychologist or psychiatrist. I'm not saying that they're wrong. I'm just telling you to make sure you investigate. Most of the time, they just put the word Christian in front of it, and that's all it is. And literally, psychology and psychiatry was developed as an alternative to the Bible. That's what it was. Because up until the point that it was developed, counseling came from the Bible. That's where it came from. So just understand that. And again, I'm not saying bad things. But with that said, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. That's verse 22 of Romans chapter 3. Verse 22. And that means they became so smart, worldly, intellectually, lots of college, lots of all of these things, and they got so smart that they got dumb. You say, well, how do you do that? It's because they forget who God is. We forget that our knowledge is nothing without God. And people become dependent on their own. And so, professing themselves to be wise, they became fools. But I'm not, like I said, I'm not going to go into all this. You actually, believe it or not, and I don't know if I think this is for the older crowd, or the older kids, not for the younger, so I'll just leave it alone. But if you know what, well, I'll say it like this. If you know what STDs are, verse 27 describes that. At the end of verse 27. Verse 27, at the end of it says, and receiving in themselves that recompense of their error, which was meat. If you read the rest of the verse, you understand what it means. And when it says, which was meat, it's saying, which was, they earned it. That's actually describing, STDs and things like that. But there is a wealth of knowledge in one chapter. There's so much in chapter 1 that you could literally preach a different sermon probably all year long off the one chapter. That's why I preach chapter 1 out there. But without keeping on going on, because I could keep on going on, I'm going to go back to what I ended up looking at. This past Sunday we had what?
Appreciation.
Pastor Appreciation Day. And it was kind of funny as I sat down to determine what I was going to look at and what take out of Romans chapter 1. And then when I found out that Mama and Daddy were going to Lake Eufaula, and I had both services tonight, I said, okay, how can I tie this all together? I'm reading chapter 1 again, and I come across verse 12. That is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. Paul wrote this to the Roman, the church at Rome. Okay? Last Sunday we had Pastor Appreciation. And it's, appreciated. And I want all of y'all to know, the ones that gave the cards and stuff like that, I really appreciate that. Y'all honestly don't know how much that means. And I'm not the kind of person that can describe to you how much that means. But it does mean a lot. And I'm very, very appreciative of that. And I want to kind of look at that a little bit. Paul wrote that. That is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith, both of you and me. What Paul is saying is, I want to come be with y'all at your church, because when I get to come be with y'all, the people in this church, you comfort my spirit. You make me feel good. You edify me, you exhort me. And just so y'all know, edify means to instruct and improve the mind in knowledge generally, and particularly in moral and religious knowledge, and faith, and in holiness. And to exhort is to use words or arguments to incite to good deeds. All right. So Paul is edified. Y'all know who Paul is? You can say that. But he is the apostle. He was the apostle to the Gentiles. He is the guy that described the church age. This is a guy that's important. He's important in the kingdom of God, is he not? And on this earth, I mean, it's Paul. That's the guy that wrote about half of the New Testament. He's a big dog. And what did he say? He said, I am exhorted. I am edified. I am comforted. I find peace. I am made happy. I am content by being with those in the church, those of the faith. This guy admits that he needs to be exhorted. He needs to be edified. And did you know that pastors probably need more edification and exhortation than most of anybody in the church? Do you know that? Think about it. And here's something that I know, or at least I thought this way, and I know others do, when I was younger, especially when I was a kid. Well, a pastor, he's not a human being. He's not like all the rest of it. He's not a pastor. He's up here, I'm down here. Pastors are just people. They're men just like any other man. They're human beings. So, with that said, they're going to have ups and downs like anybody else. And they're going to have times when they need somebody to lift them up. Just like you may need somebody to lift you up. And here's something to think about that a lot of times that weighs heavy on a pastor. When you think about other people, well, all right, let's do it that way. If you think, let's say you're thinking about your friend or your family member, what are you thinking of when you think of it? Does that make sense? What do you think about if you're thinking about, say, your friend or your family? Are you thinking about let me put it like this. You hope they have good health. Does that come to mind? when you think of your friends, your family, or something like that? What else do you think of when you think of friends and family? Right, exactly. What else? I mean, what could we do? We occasionally think of a friend or a family member pops in our minds, and we think about them, and we think of sometimes because we think, oh, I hope they're healthy. We think, I hope they're prosperous.
Or I'll think, why am I thinking of them?
And that's good. That's good, and that's what we should do, because sometimes that happens. But I mean, in general, what we think when we think of our friends or families or things like that, we're thinking of, when we wish things for them or we hope things for them, we hope good health. We hope prosperity. We hope longevity. We hope for things like that, do we not? I mean, honestly, I think we do. You know that a lot of times, not always, because again, pastors are just people, but you know a lot of times when pastors think of friends and family, the congregation members, and the church, and all of those things, you know one of the first things that pops in their mind? One of the first things that pops in their mind a lot of times is, I wonder if they're going to go to heaven. Do they know the Lord? If they died right now today, where will they spend eternity? And I'm not saying that to toot the horns of a pastor. I'm saying that because that's part of the calling of being a pastor. It's part of what God puts in your heart. Because that's what you are as a pastor. It's your job. That's your call. What you're here for is to spread the word, is to teach people about God, about salvation, about all those things. So a lot of times that pastor, although he wants good health for people, and he wants good, prosperity, and he wants all of those things, a lot of times when somebody runs through his mind, he goes, well, let's say, are they going to heaven? And every now and then, that starts to weigh real heavy in the pastor. Are they saved? Do they know the Lord? Do I do what I'm supposed to do as a pastor? Do I study enough? Do I pray enough? Do I talk about the Lord enough? Do I do those things that I'm supposed to do so that maybe I'm planting a seed or I'm watering so God can give the increase? So when things like that happen, you may see that a pastor needs a little exhortation, a little bit of edifying. And that's so remember, pastors need it too. And I'm not trying to get y'all to feel sorry for me. I don't want you to think that way. I'm talking to you about pastors and about the role of them. And that's what we're talking about here tonight, about this and why Paul wrote this. Now let's keep going, because I got a few verses I want to add in here to this. So, first of all, pastors sometimes need exhortation. They need that edification. They need all that. Sometimes they need criticism. A pastor needs criticism. What kind of criticism? What kind does he not need? No. What kind does he not need? Destructive. What is destructive criticism? Give you an example. All right, but give me an example. Yeah, that's not really criticism. All right. Well, and how you present that is actually the difference between constructive and destructive. To flat out just come out and say, yeah, you're serving the Lord, that would be a destructive criticism. Very good. Even though I know a lot of mine are, but that's your fault, not mine. But that is. And then gossip is destructive criticism. Those kind of things. Let me read something. And so I think we get an idea of what destructive criticism is. First of all, sometimes a pastor needs criticism. Good example. Remember when Paul and Peter had been sitting there eating with the Gentiles, And then the Jews from Jerusalem showed up, and old Peter decided he couldn't eat with the Gentiles anymore, so he stepped away from there and went over there and just mingled with them and acted like a Jew again. What did Paul do? He called him out. He criticized him. But that was constructive criticism.
I
The
can
word-
also imagine that it's very difficult as a pastor and there's not people luxury to experience offense. But it is a human emotion.
Right.
We're all
It is, and because remember,
So it is difficult to hear things and not be, like, I would imagine it is extremely difficult to keep that line on.
as a human, you can't, because you're human, just like anybody else. That's where you have to lean on the Lord and allow Him to lead you, God, do those things. And that's real. There is a way of giving things. Y'all heard of it, let go and let God. Yes, a catchy little saying that people like to put on stuff, but it's true, and there is a way to let go of things and let God take care of it. You'll learn that. You learn that through prayer and reading the Bible, and that happens. But you're right, and that is the thing, and you don't have that luxury, that's true. You have to accept it and use it for how God would have you use it. That's what you got to do. But let me read to you a little bit about that. Let's go to the book of Job real quick. We're going to go just a few. Like I said, I got a couple of things I want to look at real quick. And then we'll wrap this up. In Job chapter 16, Job 16, I'm going to read to you verses 1 through 5. Now, I don't think I got to tell most of us about Job. I think most of us understand that Job went through a lot of bad stuff, right? Y'all know that, right? Or Job, wait a minute, Job was a Super Bowl winner, right? Wow, this is a rough crowd tonight. Yeah, I've seen it, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I've seen a whole lot of side conversations going on tonight, and I've seen a whole lot of not hearing the word that I said. And I get it, it happens, because I am bored sometimes. And so that goes to that stuff. But,
I'm using that as an example.
yeah, no, I know. No. That's it, and I was, believe me, I'm not.
Sure that you did that.
I do know that.
Wendy was like,
Wendy, listen, you should know you're not going to hurt my feelings. You know me.
Is that something?
But that is something, and it is, and that's why I'm working it back into it. So. But anyway, my point is this. I asked for a short amount of time. I promise you I'm trying to give you something good. So if you know those conversations till after church, I would appreciate that. Thank you very much. You see, that's what I'm glad. Anyways, let's keep moving. Job, that guy Job. Somebody tell me a little bit about Job.
We got tested
Yeah,
the devil was the one doing it.
Okay.
God gave
So did he have good things going on or bad things?
and his friends were not very friendly.
Oh, that's the one I was looking for. Let's read Job chapter 16, verses 1 through 5. Then Job answered and said, talking to these friends that's been talking to him, I have heard many such things. Listen to this. Miserable comforters are ye all. In other words, he said, y'all ain't helping me none. Y'all riding me hard. I thought y'all was here to lift my spirits. Y'all are terrible at this. Shall vain words have an end, or what emboldeneth thee that thou answerest? I also could speak as you do. If your soul were in my soul's stead, I could heap up words against you and shake mine head at you. In other words, hey, if we turn this around, I'm not the one having a bad time. You're having a bad time. I can come in there and I can throw it on you too. I can tell you how awful you are and that you earn this and this and that. And that. I can give that destructive criticism. But then look what he said in verse 5. But I would strengthen you with my mouth, and the movement of my lips should assuage your grief. In other words, he says, I would take that opportunity to try to edify you, to try to exhort you, to try to lift you up. I would take that opportunity. It's what Job was saying. I would try to lift you up. Now let me tell you something. What does a pastor try to do most of the time? Try to encourage you in the faith. Try, now don't get me wrong, pastors get hard sometimes, because sometimes you got to. But most of the time, the whole point is to edify you, to lift you up. That's when we come together. That's what church is about. It's to be lifted up. Be it from learning about things in our life that we shouldn't have in our life, or just because it's an awesome, wonderful thing that day. That's the thing. But Job, in this case, Job was needing encouragement. Why? He was needing to be encouraged to carry on in his faith. When you see a Christian, a brother or a sister, and this is not just for pastors, this is for everybody. When you see a brother or sister that seems to be down a little bit, that seems to be off a little bit, encourage them. Encourage them to stick with God. Encourage them to continue in faith. That's what Job needed at this time. He needed that encouragement. He definitely needed it. You know, and what's crazy is that even today, even though we've got the book of Job to describe this to us, how many of us, and we've all been guilty of it at least once in our lives, but how many of us will look sometimes, it may be just in our minds, we may talk about it, whatever. How many of us go, we must have done something really bad that we haven't lived life like this right now. We've all done it. Every one of us have said, you know, you see that person and suddenly they lost their job, their wife ran off and left them, they got, their car broke down, and then their other car broke down, you know what I'm saying? And then you say, they must be doing something wrong. Or how they used to say it, they ain't paying the preacher. Everybody, we've all heard them say that. And we all sit there and say we've read the Bible and we've read the book of Job, and we still say things like that.
I even say that to myself sometimes.
What have I done? That's right. What about when Job gives us the perfect example that that's not necessarily the case? So instead of that destructive criticism, encouragement would go a long ways in that person's life. Believe me, it would. When a person's down and out and having a rough run of it, they need some encouragement. That's what they need. And like I said, this applies to everybody, but that applies to pastors as well. They need that encouragement because they're going to have those runs sometimes too. If Job had that run, how did they describe Job? Can anybody tell me the way God described Job? What? Nope. What? Something. It was something like that. A perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. He was basically said to be about as perfect a guy, perfect a person as a human being could be. So, in God's eyes, not in man's eyes, in God's eyes. So if that guy could have the worst run of luck of any human being that's ever lived, do we need to be sitting there questioning what sin is in other people's lives to cause them to have all these problems? Oh, I hope you will be encouraged. Encourage folks to stay in faith. Always encourage others to stay in faith. That's a good one. Now, let's move on out of that dark spot over there, and let's move into this. My little headline on this, my little letter number, Roman numeral number 3 was, when you do good, I do good. Go to 1 Thessalonians. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3. And we're going to read verses 7 and 8. 1 Thessalonians 3, 7 and 8. Therefore, brethren, Paul wrote this, we were comforted over you in all our affliction and distress by your faith. For now we live if you stand fast in the Lord. Anybody want to tell me what he was saying right there? What was Paul saying right there? Any ideas? Read Joshua back to verse 7 on the board. Therefore, brethren, we were comforted over you in all our affliction and distress by your faith. For now we live if you stand fast in the Lord. Go back to 7 and leave 7 right there. What is that? Does anybody understand what Paul is saying right there? Actually, yes, but that also says this. We know Paul suffered a lot of misery, right? I mean, I think we all know that. That Paul, what all happened to Paul? That would have been John. That's only a church. Shipwrecked. He murdered a lot of people. He what? Shipwrecked again. Actually, he was shipwrecked at least 3 times.
Then he gets stoned.
He got stoned and left for dead outside the city. What else happened to Paul? Thrown in prison multiple times. At the end, he got beheaded. He got snake bit one time. Y'all remember that one? Well, there was a poisonous snake. It bit him on the hand. I missed that one. Okay. And he lived through that. Do you think it hurt?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a snake bite. It hurt.
Venomous.
I think God let him live, but he hurt. So we know that Paul got beat up. We know he had a rough life. We know he spent a lot of time in prison. We know he wrote some of these books, some of these epistles from prison. Yet,
Paul's not the thorn in my side.
yes, Paul had a
So
thorn.
there was some physical affliction.
Yeah, for Pergamum. But he had, it says, it boils down to this, he had an affliction.
Yeah.
We don't know. He never tells us in the Bible. We never learn what that affliction was. There's, some say it was eyesight, some say it was this, some say it was that. We don't know because he does not say. What we do know is that on the first time that he prayed about God taking this affliction from him, God said, "My grace is sufficient." Or in other words, you hold on to that affliction, you understand that I'm done. And Paul prayed about that again. So we know Paul suffered a lot physically. And so when it says our affliction and distress, he's talking about even though I am afflicted and I am distressed and I'm in bad places, I may be in prison or shipwrecked or whatever it is, when I get the report that you are strong in the faith, that you have stayed in the faith, that you still love the Lord, you're still showing people the Lord, you're living your life for the Lord, even in the worst spot of my life, when I'm in that worst place, there's that little bit of confident peace that comes to my heart. In all things, I'm content. But he's saying, and now here's where I'm going with that. When a pastor sees or hears somebody from his congregation doing something good for the Lord, be it at the church or church grounds, or especially out in town, job, school, at the store, or whatever, when he sees or he hears of somebody that sits in his congregation doing something great for the Lord, you know what that does for that pastor? Big time. Matter of fact, it is one of the most encouraging things that can be done for a pastor. Now, some would say, well, that's kind of pride, all of that. That's not what it is. It's validating the words that you speak from that pulpit, that they are the words of God, and that you are doing your due diligence. You're studying to show yourself approved, and the things that come out of your mouth are actually what God would have you say, and not what you would say. And then it's showing in the lives of others. That kind of goes back to that thought of when a pastor, one of the things that can really weigh a pastor down is when he gets to thinking about, are you going to heaven? Are you going to heaven? Where's your eternity? And he has to think about that. It kind of goes back to that. So when that pastor sees somebody doing something that is glorious in the eyes of the Lord, that does a lot for him. You know what else that happens? When that pastor sees you doing things that are not glorious to the Lord, that discourages the pastor just as much as it encourages him to see good things. Well, in a way it is, and in a way it's not, because a lot of times as parents we get mad when our kids disappoint.
Well, it's still heartbreaking.
It heartbreaks, but we do get mad. But that pastor a lot of times will just get the heartbreak for it, and just, and again, this is about all of us.
And then
It's
you can
not,
go higher than that, and that's just heartbreaking the Lord.
well, and that's part of why that's why it's the heartbreak. So a pastor will break his glasses sometimes, but when a church gets dry, when there's not a lot of good things happening in the church, when there's not members of the church going out and doing things for others out in the community sometimes, but really, the hard place is in the church, because that's the most obvious. But when those things happen, it is discouraging for a pastor. And it's not prideful. It's about the fact that maybe I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm not committing enough to my time of prayer and study. Maybe I'm not listening to the Lord. Maybe I'm not, and then it goes back into that thing. Well, now maybe I'm the stumbling block in that person's life. See what Satan does?
I think it's worth it church too, because I don't have any call for, no, y'all, I mean.
That's actually that's not in a Baptist church, that's in some churches. Because I've been in there's plenty of Baptist churches out there that's not as quiet. But actually the truth is a lot of that comes down to the personalities that God gives us and stuff. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a loud person, if I'm sitting listening to good preaching, most of the time it's not leading me to holler or anything like that. And David's going to, but I'm not led that way. I find it gives me content.
The older I get, the less and less I need. I used to think that I needed more of the emotion stuff, and now I realize it's all it was. I needed my emotions.
You want an emotion.
Now I recognize that my sweetest moments with God have been very peaceful and quiet.
Wasn't in the whirlwind, wasn't in the wildfire, wasn't in none of
I
that.
think too, like with spiritual maturity, you start to.
But that is different, and understand that it is different for different people. And I think it's how God leads us to the churches that we go to, that He groups us in groups
But I
that
think what
work
you said
together.
earlier was right. If the sermon is one, that's our fault, not yours.
No, hold on now,
But-
partially.
Hold on. Listen, because listen to this. Okay, no, I really do very much agree with that, because, we're not here to be entertained.
That's right.
We're
We're
not
not.
here to have our emotions
No.
fed, and that all of those are nice things
Mhm.
to supplement,
Fine.
I guess,
Yeah.
the word of God, if they come with it. but-
Well, there's
but
places
they're not
for those
necessary.
things. They're not necessary, and they're not the purpose. They
And I
are.
think even when our mind and heart is in the right place, even if the delivery may not even be spot on, like, I still
Honestly,
think
it's
God
not
can
delivery.
do
God
things
can
with
do-
it if we're willing to receive. So, I think as you get further, I don't know, I think you learn this
You're
more
right.
about,
And here's the thing.
you're just the middleman.
I'm not, and that's right, that's always.
And I think you learn as you get older too, that not every single sermon has to be.
It may not be an effective. Just like
We
I
may go
said
through
a while ago, we may be given a verse, God may put a verse or a scripture on our hearts, and we not really get, why is this? But I feel led to say it.
Yeah.
Why? Because maybe it wasn't for you. Maybe it was for somebody else who needed to hear that. And that's the thing. And as far as if it's born, it's not my fault, it's yours. That's true if I'm doing what the Lord would have me do. If I'm not, then it's my fault. And then I'm responsible for not doing what I should be doing, because it was my call to be a pastor. So that goes all the way around. But it is true, and I can assure you this. I may be the worst speaker in the world, and I'm not a great speaker, but I may be the worst speaker in the world. If God is speaking a word through me, and I'm doing what He's telling me to do, your heart's receptive, you're going to get it. And that's right. And that's exactly true. It's not about the emotion. It's not about all of those things. It is, honest to goodness, it's about our hearts being ready to receive. And that's what that amounts to. So, understand that your pastor, or even for pastors and the congregation, any way you want to look at it, we are comforted. We should all be comforted. But pastors especially are very comforted by the faith he sees in others, or the fruits of the Spirit that he sees in his congregation. That's a big plus for him. That's a,
I was gonna say, one of the things that we talked about in the past that goes along with what you're just saying is arrive expecting. Like that is so much that if you come and you're expecting to get something from them, then that's where that receptive heart comes in.
you might just get it. So, and that's the truth. And a lot of times we do arrive we're already thinking about something down the road. We are, or we're studying on something that was, We are, well, it's kind of like in ball. We ain't paying attention to this team, we're looking at the next because this one ain't gonna be nothing. So we don't pay attention to this team, and this team beats us. Same thing. We come to church and we're thinking about what we're gonna go do, what we got to go do on Monday at work. Because it's so, oh, how am I gonna work this? And we've already skipped out of this lesson that we should have gotten. Just being on Sunday.
And the other thing I was gonna say is not to discount how pastors feel, but in truth, as believers, every one of us should think like that. When we think about our family members and our friends, we should think, is their soul right?
And I can promise you that's not just pastors, that is a maturity in your Christian life. Believe me, that is. The day and the first time that ever hits you, and I mean hits you, I remember the first time it hit me, I really did. I remember the very first time the realization hit me that some people that I love just didn't turn me in. It hurt. I mean, all of a sudden it hurt. I just, and it wasn't, I knew it all my life. I've always known, I grew up in this stuff. You know what I mean? But I remember the day, the first time that it hit me, that it struck me, and it grabbed me, and it said, and I realized. And you know, that had more to do, I think, with me wanting to do what God did, whatever He did. That completes the mission. You know, things like that, and that's part of that Christian maturity. And it comes from our study and our prayer life and those things. And the more committed we are to God, the more He's going to reveal to us. The more He's going to let us go. And sometimes it's heartbreaking stuff, but it's good heart. Because if it breaks your heart, if somebody might have to spend eternity in heaven, that's going to move you to do something to try to make sure that don't happen. And that's the good part. We're good at it. But let me wrap this part up by going back to Romans chapter 1. And we're going to go to a few verses down. Now we know that verse 12 said, that is, that I may be comforted together with you by the mutual faith spoken to you. He's looking forward to coming together and being comforted, and being edified, being exhorted. Why? Because he says here in verse 15, so as much as in me is, I am ready to preach the gospel to you that are at Rome also. What is he saying right there? He's saying this. A pastor needs that edification. He needs that exhortation. He needs to be confident. He needs to be lifted up. He needs you, the congregation, he needs you to help him. You know why? Because that's what keeps him preaching. That's what keeps him doing what God called him to do. That's what causes that preacher to keep on working, to keep on in the faith. Is the congregation doing those things. You say, well, that's not why you should do it. You're right, it's not. But that's what helps you to do it. There have been many preachers in this world that have left the pulpit because of not getting edified and not getting exhorted in his own church. Believe me, I know some of them. It's like Jeremiah. I've tried and I've tried and I've tried, and nobody's listening and nobody's hearing and this is landing on deaf ears, Lord. I ain't doing it no more. Remember Jeremiah said that? He said, I ain't going to tell him. Not another thing. And then it burned. And when he did, and you know what? But that's thank God, because that when you call, and when you love the Lord and you're called to do it, you're going to have to do it. It's going to burn in your bones if you don't. You'll argue with him because we're stubborn human beings. And that's what we're going to do. But you will come back to it. But the only thing is I have seen that happen to people, and that's a shame. You know, because we're human. Everybody's human. Pastor is just a human being. So here's my encouragement to you. Encourage your pastor. Not because you want to suck up and be the pastor's pet or whatever. Do it because God laid it on you. Do what God would have you do. God would have you do. And that's the truth. But not just your pastor. Everybody in the congregation. Everybody around you. Somebody's going to need a little education. Somebody needs a little education. And you can find that comfort amongst each other. Paul said so. And you get that comfort. just want to encourage you to look at that. Questions, comments, or anything else? Anybody? Anybody? See, now this leads me to this. See what reading and studying a chapter can do for you? Simply by reading Romans chapter 1 again, and I can assure you I have read Romans chapter 1 probably somewhere over 1,000 times, I'm sure. I've always been drawn to it, always drawn to it. That was the first time that ever stood out in Romans chapter 1. I've got notes galore on Romans chapter 1. This time, when did I start on that? Sometime during the week last week, I read Romans chapter 1 again, and verse 12 stood out. First time I read it, and I've read it that many times. That's why we do those readings and these studies and things like that. And I promise you, if we all had an opportunity, we all would have read Romans chapter 1 and we had something, and we would have picked out whatever stood out to us, probably every one of us would have had a little something different. And that's what it does. That's what's so glorious about this word of God. I don't care how many times you read it. You know how you read it? You got a favorite book, the readers in here? You have a favorite book, and you'll read it again and again and again. But eventually, there's no new surprises anymore. You read it and you remember every bit of it. I know I do. I've got a couple of books that I have read, honest to goodness, 100 times. I love the books, and I literally will think that it's going to be different this time. But eventually that goes away because I know what's going to happen. That would never happen in this book, I promise you. You read that Bible, you start right now, read through it, and read through it 100 times in a row. I guarantee you'll find something new every time. This is where the world works. So I will encourage you once again, read a little bit in Romans chapter 1 if you get a chance. We'll stick with that one. All right, any questions, comments, any concerns, anything else? Everybody good? I heard a yes. Well then let's do some real quick. Let me put my word blessing on. Yes, sir. Next week I want to straighten. I'll be afraid. Yes, sir. Yes. Faith and the ball team will be opening up Thursday. Their ball season starts Thursday. So I'll remember them. And they will get to go see her so anyway, all right, Faith. And Granny and Pa are at Lakeview Falls. They was on our Rascal County this week. And they made sure to send me some pictures on that. So y'all go remember them and ask the Lord to bring them safely back to the home when they come back. Yes, sir. Have we got any word on Anderson? I know he was supposed to be going to get some new scans and stuff. And word stuff. Yes, sir. No. Okay. That always hurts. Is it all right, or is it getting infected?
I don't know, but y'all try to
Well, he'll know soon enough if he needs it. Yes, sir? Yes, sir. Say it a little bit loud. Okay.
Doctor.
That a boy, good job. Thank you, sir. All right, yes, ma'am. Granny's old toast. Yes, ma'am.
My eyes, because I have an eye infection.
An eye infection? Oh my goodness gracious.
I have to wear glasses every day when I get home. In my bag for 4 hours.
Ew, old glasses.
Sometimes I put it on at 2 and 3. Do that. At 4 I have to wear it at 9.
Oh my goodness. Well, we'll pray for that. Anybody else? Piper, I saw your hand up a while ago.
Daisy.
Travis and Janet's, 8 or 9, Daisy, she has some. I'll have to take it, but it's bad. Please make sure that she's stuff like that.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I was in my hospital yesterday because she was having terrible pain on her right side, and they thought it was her appendix, but they went back this morning and she had a cyst on her ovaries.
Well, that's better than an appendix, but still. Yeah, that's bad. That's very
Trying
painful.
to take pain.
Well, maybe take care of that one quick. Those are very painful. Yeah, I've known a few people that's dealt with those. All right, anybody else? Yes, ma'am. Yeah. Have y'all heard anything? Yeah, keep on moving. All right, anybody else? Miss Sarah and Miss Ruby, that's correct.
And Miss Sarah is worried her license and that she has a felony pressure.
I seen her driving down the road today.
And, well, she had a little new accident the other day.
All right, y'all remember Miss Sarah? Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, now that you said that, I can't even recall his name, and I know it, all late. But yeah, if you remember, I've got it wrote down at home for him. But, and Rush, how is any word on him? But maybe I do. He's still, but he's going back through that intensive therapy again, right? The radiation therapy. They got rid of it now. Anyway, yeah, y'all remember Rush. All right, anybody else? Yeah, keep on moving, Randy. Yes, sir. Brendan got a driver test. When?
He doesn't have to drive, it's just personal.
Y'all always ready?
No, I think he's telling me we're paying for next year.
We're getting ready.
I'll start praying now.
In that case, can y'all pray for me?
Oh, yeah, been doing that, so.
I think it's all year.
Yeah.
They put everyone else out of the drive.
Good knowing you, David. All right, anybody else? Yes, sir? Oh, yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Oh, yeah. Absolutely, y'all do remember. All right. Anybody else? Oh, we almost there. All right. I ain't gonna say it now. Okay, we done got it. Going once, going twice. All right. Who wants to pray tonight? Who would like to lead us in prayer tonight? Oh, I'm fixing to have to pick somebody. I'm fixing to have to pick somebody. Y'all bow your heads. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for this wonderful day that you've given us. We thank you for this wonderful opportunity to come together, Lord. Help us to understand just how fortunate we are to be able to have a church home and be able to come here and really anytime we want to, Father, and to gather together in your name and to have fellowship so that we might edify and encourage and exhort each other, so we might be able to make it to that next appointed hour. Father, I pray that you would put it on each and every one of us hearts to always try to live our life that is an example of you, so those that see us and those that are around us, those that we love and those that we don't even know, Lord, so they might see what they should do, and so they might have an opportunity to spend eternity in heaven with us. Father, I pray that you would just make that real to each and every one of us. Lord, I ask that you would just go with us, be with each and every one that's made mention of here tonight. The sick ones, Lord, the heartbroken ones, Father, I pray that you would just lift and that you give peace and comfort and healing and all of these things, Lord. You know all the many needs that's on each heart. I pray that you would just bless, Father. I pray that we would in turn bless you. Lord, I ask that you would just lead and guide and direct us, bring us back at the next appointed hour, to be your will to give us that much time, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Y'all have a wonderful rest of your week. We'll see you soon. Now, the old people, y'all hang out for a minute.